When most Americans hear the word slavery, they think about something that ended more than 150 years ago. They picture plantations, chains, forced labor, human beings treated as property. And legally, slavery was abolished. But there is an uncomfortable exception written directly into the 13th Amendment. Slavery and involuntary servitude were prohibited except as a punishment for crime. That exception matters because America eventually built the largest incarceration system in the world, and inside that system, incarcerated people have performed labor for generations. And when the incarceration profit and extremely cheap labor intersect, especially in the debate over private prisons, I think we need to ask some uncomfortable questions. Prison labor is real labor. People in prison do real work. They clean. They cook. They maintain facilities. They do laundry. They perform maintenance. Some participate in manufacturing, agriculture, call centers, or other work programs, depending on the jurisdiction and facility. This isn't imaginary work. If these jobs were performed outside prison walls, somebody would have to be paid to do them. But incarcerated workers can receive extremely low wages, and in some circumstances, they receive no wages at all. That's where I have a problem. Because punishment for committing a crime is supposed to be the loss of your freedom. When did that automatically mean your labor should become nearly worthless? Then you add profit. Private prisons make this conversation even more uncomfortable. A private prison introduces a corporation into something that should fundamentally be about justice, public safety, punishment, and rehabilitation. The government contracts with a company to operate a correctional facility. That company is a business. Businesses are designed to control expenses and generate returns. And that's where I think the incentives deserve serious scrutiny. A society should want fewer people committing crimes. We should want fewer prisoners. We should want rehabilitation to work. We should want people to serve their sentences, come home, find employment, rebuild their lives, and never return. But incarceration itself can also generate revenue for private operators. Those two incentives don't sit comfortably together. A justice system should never have to answer to shareholders. The person becomes an economic unit. This is what bothers me most. Once profit enters incarceration, it's easy for human beings to start looking like numbers on a spreadsheet. Beds, occupancy, contracts, staffing costs, food costs, medical costs, labor costs, revenue, margins. But behind every number is a human being. Some committed terrible crimes. Some committed relatively minor offenses. Some will spend decades incarcerated. Others will eventually be standing beside us at the grocery store, riding the bus with us, working beside us, and living in our neighborhoods. Accountability matters, but accountability and exploitation aren't the same thing. We should be capable of believing that someone deserves punishment for a crime, while also believing that the person retains basic human dignity. America's history makes this different. You cannot discuss forced prison labor in America without acknowledging the history that followed emancipation. After the Civil War, Southern states developed systems that criminalized behavior and disproportionately swept Black Americans into incarceration. Convict leasing then allowed prisoners to be leased to private businesses and plantations. The conditions could be horrific. So when somebody says the connection between slavery and prison labor is exaggerated, I think history demands a more serious examination. The connection isn't simply rhetoric. There is an actual historical relationship between emancipation, criminal punishment, forced labor, and systems that profited from incarcerated people. That doesn't mean every modern prison job is equivalent to chattel. It isn't. There are prison jobs and vocational programs that incarcerated people actively want because they provide structure, skills, experience, or income. That distinction matters, but it doesn't erase the larger question. How much power should the state or a corporation operating on behalf of the state have over labor of someone who could not simply walk away? Can labor be voluntary behind bars? That's a difficult question. If somebody voluntarily chooses a prison job, learns a trade, gets paid fairly, and develops skills that help them after release, I can see enormous value in that. I'd actually like to see more meaningful training. Teach people electrical work, plumbing, carpentry, coding, cooking, welding, manufacturing, business skills, anything that gives somebody a legitimate path when they return home. But meaningful rehabilitation is very different from creating a captive workforce that can be paid pennies because workers have almost no bargaining power. Outside prison, if your employer treats you terribly, theoretically, you can quit. You can organize. You can look for another job. You can demand higher wages. A prisoner doesn't have the same freedom. That imbalance of power changes everything. Cheap labor isn't really cheap. Someone always absorbs the cost. If incarcerated people perform valuable work for extremely low compensation, we should ask where the economic benefit goes. Does it help victims? Does it support prisoners' families? Does it build savings for people to use when they're released? Does it fund rehabilitation? Does it provide restitution? Or does somebody else simply benefit because the labor is cheap? Those are completely different models. Imagine someone working for years while incarcerated and eventually being released with almost nothing. Then society tells them, get an apartment, get transportation, find a job, buy clothes, pay for food, stay out of trouble, rebuild your life, and do it immediately. How? If we genuinely care about reducing crime, helping people leave prison with some money and marketable skills seem considerably smarter than releasing them with nothing. We need to decide what prison is for. This entire debate eventually comes down to one question. What is incarceration supposed to accomplish?